We're going to start on page 73. And the way this works is Janine and I read, and then we talk about the literature. And if anyone has any questions, then you can ask them. Okay, you ready?
Ready.
You want to say hi to anyone?
Hi to everybody, obviously. Hi, everybody.
Okay. So let's pray. Creator, thank you for this beautiful day today. Thank you for this last week and the growing and the experiences that I've had. It's been a bit of a tougher week than I've had in the past. And I just want to thank you for giving me the challenges that you have and allow me to learn and grow and, have people call me out on my shit, even though I'm still not happy about it. And I just want to say thanks, Creator, for all the people that want to change their own life and that are here today or that are anywhere in the meetings or, anyone who's trying to take the steps forward to create a better life. And, that's what inspires me, Creator. And I thank you for allowing me to see that in a good way. I ask, Creator, that you allow me to share my experiences today with step 5 and all the steps in a good way, that I might be able to pull a new experience or an old experience that could be helpful for my own healing and growing or somebody else's. I just thank everyone here and pray for the alcoholic and addict suffering out there and the ones that have never heard of the program, that they might be able to find a way out. Hi.
God, thank you for this day. Thank you for everybody here who's had a sober day. And thank you for everybody who is still out there reaching out. There's a couple right now specifically that I want to pray for. Let them to continue to be willing and let the people show up that can help them get to where they need to be. Detox for now. And that they continue forward, because there is a solution. And when we fall, we don't stop, and we don't actually even start over. We got to pick ourselves back up and continue learning. And so for everybody who's struggling, and there's a lot of people just struggling sober, and I want to pray for them that they are able to pull something out of what they hear tonight, if there's people in the room, and then the people who aren't in the room, that they come across something that is actually truth, and the truth will set you free. And there's so much mishmash out there in the world of mental health and society, and there's a lot of mixed messages, and it's hard to pull out what the truth is. And so I found that the truth is through you and in the demolition of self. And I've never known how to do that until I found a 12-step program that could show me the way to get out of my own way. Thank you for me getting to be, I just always feel like a sense of survivor's guilt, because I don't know why I got this program, and other people try and they don't seem to get it. And anybody here who's sober is so blessed and so lucky. And thank you, God. Thank you for the miracle that you've given us. Amen. So last week I had joined in late online, and I was listening. And so there was a group chat. Well, there was a chat in the group online, and we ended up coming up with a list of just different ways that the female's step 4 can look, as there are a little bit of gender differences in some of the areas. So I'm going to hold on to that. I don't want to wreck the flow of like starting with 5 and backtracking, because this is going to come up again in step 5 when we talk about, we're going to have a sane and sound sex ideal. So I'm going to bring some of this stuff into it when I talk about that. So just for the women online that I said I was going to talk about this right now, I'm going to actually put this in where it's more relevant and flows better, but it will come up again, the list that we've talked about, and I'll bring it in a more meaningful way when it fits better, actually, when we do the ideals moving forward in step 5.
Okay, second paragraph, 73. More than most people, the alcoholic leads a double life. He is very much the actor. To the outer world, he presents a stage character. This is the one that he likes his fellows to see. He wants to enjoy a certain reputation, but knows in his heart he doesn't deserve it. The inconsistency is made worse by the things that he does on his sprees. Coming to his senses, he is revolted at certain episodes he vaguely remembers. These memories are a nightmare. He trembles to think that someone might have observed him. As fast as he can, he pushes these memories far inside of himself. He hopes they will never see the light of day. He is under constant fear and tension. That makes for more drinking. Psychologists are inclined to agree with us. We have spent thousands of dollars for examinations. We know but few instances where we have given these doctors a fair break. We have seldom told the whole truth, and nor have we followed their advice. Unwilling to be honest with these sympathetic men, we were honest with no one else. Small wonder why many in the medical profession have a low opinion of alcoholics and their chance of recovery. We must be entirely honest with somebody if we expect to live long or happily in this world. Rightly and naturally, we think well before we choose this person or persons with whom to take this intimate and confidential step. Those of us belonging to a religious denomination which requires a confession must, and of course, will want to go to the properly appointed authority whose duty it is to receive it. Though we have no religious connection, we may still do well to talk with someone ordained by an established religion. We often find such a person quick to see and understand our problem. Of course, we sometimes encounter people who do not understand alcoholics. If we cannot or would not rather do this, we search out an acquaintance for a closed-mouthed, understanding friend. Perhaps our doctor or psychologist will be the person. Maybe one of our own family, but we cannot disclose anything to our wives or our parents, which will hurt them and make them unhappy. We have no right to save our own skin at another person's expense. Such parts of the story we tell to someone who will understand, yet be unaffected. The rule is that we must be hard on ourselves, but always considerate of others. So I'll stop there and we'll kind of discuss it. Do you want to go first? Do you want me to?
I can go first.
Okay.
I'm just gonna back up a little bit. Bill didn't read this part, but I think it's important. So it's like the beginning of this chapter on 72 starts with having made our inventory, what are we going to do with it, right? And so what we're doing with it is we're getting a new attitude. So we're trying to change our perception on things and move towards a deeper connection with God. And so an important line here is that we ascertained in a rough way. So the first round of steps, it's like you're ascertaining in a rough way. You're getting a general idea, you're getting your glaring handicap, and you're also getting what God wants you to get. Like, I think that, like when you're done writing, you're done writing, and more will be revealed later. Like, I was listening actually to an old podcast of Bill and myself, and we were talking about that actually, about Bill, and in his like year 6, he was going through some stuff and he was doing another round of steps around some things, and some more things had come out, and that's how it goes, is that you go through recovery and you grow and you hit new levels, and then you have to play yourself out. Like, you actually have to play self out and how your defects are coming out on that plane, and you get a sense of that, and then you get new understanding from that. And so you're always moving up a level and seeing how self is manifesting there, and then dealing with it and contending with it. So when we're getting in a rough way, we're getting the general idea. And in my opinion, you're getting what you're able to give. So it's like this idea of, did I get everything? Did I miss everything? All of that. It's like, well, you would know the answer to that. My sponsor's like, pray. And what comes up, and write. And when you're done writing, you're done writing. And you leave it to God that if you do the best job and you're done writing, you're done writing. And that was your first round, and then that's it. And that's the rough way, like the book says, is that you're going to be getting the glaring stuff. And that's going to be enough, because you're not going to be able to see the things that you see later on anyways. So you deal with the stuff that's coming up that's pertinent to you. And that's a question that always comes up, is like, well, did I do a thorough enough for? And in hindsight, it's always going to look like you didn't do a thorough enough for, because more stuff is revealed. So it's like, just trust that, when you're doing the 4, if it's your first time, pray, bring God into it, and trust the process, and let God guide the pen, and then leave it, and don't think about it. Do the best you can, and then leave it alone, because what comes out, and more will be revealed. And then I think just the obvious thing, that this book was written a long time ago. And so it's giving a lot of options on on who to do a 5 for, my recommendation is to always do a 5 with the person in Alcoholics Anonymous. My opinion, and this is only my opinion, is that when you try to do a 5 with a priest, it's that you don't want to face somebody or something, and you know for sure that they're going to be confident, but you're going to miss. It's a hit or miss with a priest. I did one with a pastor, and I did it. It was a fear-based 5, and it was in my mind, it was the easier, softer way. I felt like that way I knew for sure that my information wouldn't be leaked. I was in a small community, so there wasn't anybody that I felt I could trust. And as a result, I got a very shitty 5, a very shitty experience. I felt judged. The guy was not an alcoholic. I feel as though there was not any real feedback. And what we're wanting to do here is to get a 5th person in that has this experience, that has had their own 5, that can help you to then do 6, where you're creating your list of defects. Like, you can't see self from self, so you can't expect somebody to know what they're looking for in this program if they're not familiar with this program. And even if they are, they're not an alcoholic, and you can have some things that are missed, period. I think that if they're not an alcoholic who's gone through the steps, you're just shortchanging yourself. So my suggestion all the time is to find somebody in the program. There are online options. There's no excuse to not be able to find an alcoholic who's gone through the steps to do a 5 with you. I think like the people that have gone online, even though they look back, I have a couple examples in my mind, even though they look back and it's like, I went online because I would be anonymous, they still got more out of it because it was like somebody who was in a 12-step program and could give the feedback that is necessary and vital for the change that we're trying to achieve. You can go, I better get water.
Okay, so just kind of touching on a couple things here for the new people, right? Or people that don't fully understand the illness. Like, There's a Solution chapter talked about, we have 2 choices. We either die an alcoholic death, or we pick up the kit of spiritual tools laid at our feet. And it talks about that many times and throughout the step 1. And, some people, maybe when you first get here, you don't really believe that, right? Maybe you don't really believe that you're going to die or, pick up this kit of spiritual tools. But I can tell you, when you've been around this program long enough, and if you're a real deal alcoholic addict, life doesn't get any better. And like it says in We Agnostics, alcohol is the great persuader. Or drugs, could be pot, could be fentanyl, could be whatever. Alcohol is the great persuader. It finally beats us into a state of reasonableness. Sometimes this was a tedious process. And that's so true for me. It beat me into a state of reasonableness where I was willing to fucking maybe believe what this place was talking about. And it was a tedious process. And think of the word tedious. It means long and painful. Tedious is like painful, right? Doing something that's painful. Well, trying to get here and finally making it to the rooms was a tedious process for me. There was a lot of pain. Not only was the pain mine, the pain was my family's and everyone else who loved me. So that's really notable. Janine kind of touched on something that I think I touched on last week, so I won't stay on it too long, but ascertaining in a rough way what the trouble is. As we do our first step 4, okay? So I'm going to go back into the step 4 literature, and it talks about, so we considered self's common manifestations, okay? And if self is at the root of my trouble, I need to learn what self is. So I considered its common manifestations, and they're resentment, fear, and sex conduct. And I don't even say sex conduct, I say relationship conduct. So if I'm only looking at the common manifestations of self, and I'm only ascertaining in a rough way what the trouble is, what is that telling me? It's telling me that that's very surface level. And as I stay sober, that surface level is great when I first get here. My first set of steps, cool. I'm learning something about myself I've never learned before. And that self-awareness is actually really empowering. Some of it's painful because I don't want to admit some of the things. And that's the beauty of pen to paper, is now you're putting on paper what and who you actually are. Not who your brain or your idea of who you think you are. It's actually down on paper, and that's who you are right there. But the cool thing is we get to grow into something else if we want to, or we can continue with those behaviors that we see. And if we can continue with those behaviors are the manifestations of self. And if I live in those same behaviors, I will pick up a drink again, because those behaviors are the restless, irritable, discontentment. It is the spiritual malady. So there's a few things to kind of tie together here, especially for people that are new. The spiritual malady is at the root of our trouble. The spiritual malady is the same thing as self. The spiritual malady is the same thing as selfish, self-centered, the restless, irritable, discontent. So, just to know that those are the same thing. So quickly moving along here on the top of 73, we didn't read it today. I'll just touch on it again. Bottom of that first paragraph, it talks about they only thought they had lost their egoism and fear. They only thought they had humbled themselves, but they had not learned enough about humility, fearlessness, and honesty in the sense we find it necessary until they told someone else all their life story. And notice that the word all is in brackets. So when we go to a priest or a man of the cloth or whoever you want to go and do your 5 with, those guys are listening to basically a confession, okay? They're not talking to you about all of your life story. And later in this reading, you'll see that it talks about we're prepared for a long talk. And when I went to the priest or the pastor, I just read off my list.
And they just stare at you, judging.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if the guy judged me, but I just read off my list. And there was no talk. He wasn't asking me about the history of my life. There was none of that. So I just did a confession. It took about 2 hours and I was out the door kind of going, what the fuck just happened? It worked. I've never drank, right? I've never drank or used drugs ever since. So it did work. And we're not saying you can't use a pastor or a man of the cloth or whatever. We are just expressing our viewpoints on what we think is best for the alcoholic and addict, especially because we can rationalize and justify anything. And until I'm like presented with the truth and I feel that truth, and sometimes it's very painful, I won't change my ways. Okay. And if somebody else ain't showing me like, dude, this is what you're doing, this is how you are. And, I'm not going to really look at it because my mind thinks that I'm a pretty good dude most of the time. But this humility, fearlessness, and honesty, over time, we start learning more and more and more, and that kind of never ends. That's the benefit of working the steps in a practical manner, especially talking about step 10.
Hold on, I just want to say
Go
something.
ahead.
So, Bill and I both had experiences where we went to a priest and a pastor, and both our experiences were that we read off our 4 and that there was no conversation. And so if you're in a position like that right now, and that's happened to you, there's another way. So there's a way to do it where you have the conversation and you have the dialogue and you get something so much more than that, which is insight into yourself in a 12-step lens. So somebody can say to you in this language, here is the way that self is causing your failure. And they know what they're looking for, where in church, they're just listening to your stuff because that's what they're there to do. They're not there to give you the feedback and to talk to you about your defects and to talk to you about your selfishness and your fear. And that's just not in their radar of what they're doing. So they do their job, but it's just that you don't get the results that you would get if you're with somebody who's versed in this. So if you have done that, you can get sober on it, like Bill is saying, but he had to go back and do another 5 and he got so much more out of that at that time.
And again, so for some of the new people, why are we even doing this? Why are we doing this? Because we're blocked, okay? I have to do this work and express these things and get feedback. I got to unblock, right? So there's a line in the We Agnostic that says, essentially before I say that, I'm trying to find God. This is the deal. I need God, right? I need to pick up the kit of spiritual tools. This is part of it. So it can save my life. I'm blocked off with so much self. So in the We Agnostic chapter, it talks about the fundamental idea of God. So whatever God you might think you're believing in, just kind of put that on the side shelf for a while. Lay aside whatever you think God is right for this second. So the fundamental idea of God is within every man, woman, and child. So if God is within me, but it says it's often obscured by calamity, pomp, and worship of other things. So God is within me, but it's obscured, which means blocked off by calamity and pomp and worship. But it's the pomp and worship of other things that blocks God off and creates calamity. So why we're doing the 4 is we're going to identify the pomp and the worship that creates calamity. And calamity is untreated alcoholism, which is the malady. And then as I express these things and I share them with somebody else, I can start letting them go and I can start seeing what they are. So I can work on them later in the 6. So I'm doing this so I can get more in touch with the God inside myself, this unsuspected inner resource. And when you think of the unsuspected inner resource, the word resource means, to me, I'm connecting to a version of source that's also out here in the universe, like heaven or in the universe. It's a resource. It's another version of source that I can connect to, right? So that's why we're doing this. I need that channel clear. I need to clear that and get all that shit out of the way. Well, what blocks it? Well, resentments and fear and the way that I manage relationships, mind and emotional manipulation that I don't see because that's just how I lived my life. Anyway, anything else?
Well, we're on the paragraph of the double life. You want to touch on that?
No, I don't.
Okay, carry on then.
Yeah, I will. Okay, we can live a double life in addiction. So the double life is I'm gonna try to present a certain person to you in my addiction, but I know that I can be a certain person, but I also know that I'm not living up to that person. So for me, a lot of my acting in my life, that's why step 3 is about the actor.
Mhm.
I can present to you who I want you to think I am, but really behind closed doors, I'm not even happy with me. But then there's another part of me that knows that I can be something better than that, right? And as I don't live up to what I know I can be, and I have to put this act on, I'm living this double life. And a lot of what we're talking about in this paragraph has to do with like blacking out and doing really stupid things, which I did many of, and which creates more drinking, right? So I can live a double life in active addiction, but I can live a double life in recovery. And if I live a double life in recovery, I'm probably drinking again because I can't go against my own spirit and pretend like I'm this when I'm really this. Okay, so that's important. As fast as he can, he pushes these memories far inside of himself. So that's kind of what we're doing. Like, I'm going to talk about being in recovery. If I don't live what I'm telling you I'm living, and I'm out here doing some shady shit on the side, but I'm in the rooms telling you I'm doing all these things that are really God-centered, but really I'm out here being a menace to society, being a menace to women. I'm lying, thieving, cheating, stealing. I will push that stuff so far down, and then I tell you I'm something else, but I can't really lie to myself deep down where God lives. And if I keep doing that, I'll drink again. That's why the step 1 of this program is honesty. And that's why we talk about rigorous honesty, because rigorous means accurate. And I need honesty to be at the forefront of everything we do, which is a big part of what we'll get into as we talk about the step 5 and as the step 5 moves into the step 10. Okay, I'm just going to kind of quickly move on. We talked about these on page 74, we talked about using the priest or not. I'm a huge fan of using a God-centered 12-step member of the program as well. They're able to call me on my shit. They are me. They can see right through my bullshit. Like, it's funny, I can talk to alcoholics that aren't working any type of a program, and it's so easy to see through their bullshit, right? And that's like kind of what makes me effective in the rooms as the sponsors, because I've seen so much of the same bullshit that we do that it's like across the board. It's pretty much the same shit. And you can't really pull one over too much on a guy like me. So if I'm doing your step 5 and you're lying or whatever, I can call you on that, right? But a priest might not, even because you're just reading it off, right? And I can kind of show you, and sometimes maybe you're not even lying on purpose. Maybe you're not being fully disclosed on certain aspects of your story that you're telling me. I can ask the right questions that allow you to kind of bring to the surface the answers that I need to hear, so I can present them to you so that you can learn more about humility and fearlessness and honesty. Okay.
I actually am going to touch on this under the, for people who are not new and that are here for kind of the design for living. So putting everything through a defects lens, because after we get rid of the alcohol, we're contending with our defects, right? Ourself. And so when I read this double life now, the one that really sticks to me is like, I came in to recovery and I thought I was so authentic, and I thought that I was honest, and I thought that I was able to say what I thought and what I felt. And I didn't know, I didn't know until I did the steps how dishonest I actually was, because I didn't have a clue who I even was. And so it's this double life thing. I used to read it like how it's written, where it's the drinking and I come to, and I'm like, trying to recall, and I'm living this life and having a reputation I don't deserve, all of that. But it fits too, like with dishonesty and something like people pleasing, like just any ways that we're going about dishonesty, which is acting in defects, right? Like it's if I'm going out there and I'm not telling somebody what I really think and feel, and it's pertinent to the relationship or pertinent to things, moving forward, like if it's coworker, if it's project that's going on, and if I'm just stuffing it and I'm pretending things are okay, I'm not actually. So if there's something going on out here that needs to be spoken and I don't speak it, it goes in here and it comes in here, and it's dishonesty, right? And so in that way, like going back to the actor, and I'm still in that double life where I'm wanting to look a certain way. I'm wanting to enjoy a reputation here that I feel is going to cost me if I speak up. And so when I look at this double life, it's like, where am I trying to live a double life today? And like, where am I trying to be dishonest to look a certain way? And I try not to. I try, when things need to be said, I try to really say them when it's relevant to the relationship, because in the same way, like people go on like on and on in recovery to never really recover and never be able to speak their truth. And that is dishonest. And that's putting forward the biggest mask of all, I think, is projecting that you're okay with things, or that you agree with things and you go along with things, or you overcompromise, or you put your beliefs to the side to go along with someone else, or you don't, like, all it goes on and on and on. All the ways that we can people please around here. And that is dishonesty. And that's the biggest mask. And if you're always wearing a mask like that, you never will get rid of the conflict inside. And the conflict out here will always be in here and out here. And you will meet the enemy on the path traveled to avoid it. And the things you think you're avoiding are going to come up and they're going to get you. And Bill always says, if you don't deal with the shit will deal with you. And when it comes to people pleasing, that is so true. It's true in everything. But with people pleasing, you can only do that shit for so long before there's a big kaboom, and shit never goes down properly. And in recovery, when we're trying to live an honest program, we can't wear masks. It doesn't work. You will always have a spiritual malady to some degree going on when you're not being authentic. And the way that you find out that you're where you're really at is by doing the steps, because like I laugh, I embarrassingly, I laugh at the way that I thought I was authentic, because I didn't have a clue. I didn't know up from down in terms of who I was as a person. And I'm still figuring that out. But I know for sure that I let a lot of things be okay when they weren't. And it cost me a lot. It was a marriage, and it was like stuff at work, and it was a burnout. And it was like, there's so many ways that shit bled all over the place and contributed to my drinking. And if I didn't address that immediately, and through a 4, right? Through a 4. And then because I could only see a little bit of that, like I could see barely anything really. Like when I first did my first set of steps, I've said this before, but like it's for real. My 2 things that I came up with in step 6 when I was doing it myself is that I had self-reliance and I had avoidance. And those were the 2 defects I had. And that was all I could see. And that was all I was willing to get rid of. And so it wasn't until my second round of steps after treatment, where my sponsor was like, what are we doing here? You know, and then more was revealed because I could only see that in a rough way. But guess what? I can't see self from self, but my sponsor can see way more than I could because they're not in self and they're not in myself. And so then it was like, now we're looking at things from an entirely different angle, because it's not, I was prepared to look at this from an entirely different angle because I can't do that. I need somebody else. So it's we are entirely ready now to look at this from a different angle. And so that's what we did. And I needed her to tell me the other angle because I couldn't see it. So it was like all these situations where I thought I was a victim, or I thought that, you know, these things I was so hard done by and that I didn't really get the ball rolling. I could admit, like it says, that I was somewhat at fault, but I couldn't really see the ways that I was really actually getting the ball rolling and that I myself was causing my failure. And so this whole part about like, we're living a double life, you gotta make sure, I gotta make sure, like we have to make sure that we're not doing that in recovery. And I just think of it as like the actual literal mask. If I'm wearing a mask for people in any type of way, I'm not showing up in an honest way, and I'm going to get lost in that because we're supposed to be honest. And every interaction that I have that's dishonest, it pushes me a little bit off center, you know? And so if you do that so many times, you're going the wrong way completely. And so I got to make sure that I'm staying honest, and that when things come up for me, I know today that I got to speak up for things using my intuition now, which wasn't always there. So that's an important paragraph for me because it's really been like a central piece of my recovery. Sorry.
No, that was beautiful. That was awesome. And Janine's talking about, you know, learning through some of the pain also, and having the sponsor show you through some of the pride being hurt. I know when my sponsor was like showing me things, or my friends or my pillars over the years have shown me things about my own behaviors, actions, thoughts, or ideas, I didn't like some of what I heard. But because I learned that these people care more about my life than my feelings, I had to really kind of take a position where I'm like, okay, I don't like what the fuck I'm hearing, but I must listen, and then I'll discern the information later. And maybe I even left some of those situations with a resentment. And when we talk about humility, and humility is a big one, okay? And that's why I kept reading that line on the other page there. Humility, from my understanding, from what I've learned and what I've put together, is 3 levels. You got humiliation at the bottom, you got humbling through pain in the middle, and then you have a desire to seek and do God's will at the highest level. So this little piece out of step 7 and the 12 and 12 is gonna kind of describe what I'm talking about. And then in AA, we looked and we listened. Everywhere we saw failure and misery transformed by humility into priceless assets. We heard story after story of how humility had brought strength out of weakness. In every case, pain had been the price of admission into a new life. But this admission price had purchased more than we expected. It brought a measure of humility, which we soon discovered to be the healer of pain. We begin to fear pain less and desire humility more than ever. During this process of learning more about humility, the most profound result of all was our change in our attitude towards God. So we have to go through the humiliation at times. What is the humiliation? Well, when my sponsor calls me out on my prideful, selfish bullshit, and I get hurt, I'm sensitive and my pride gets hurt. And maybe it's something that I do every day that I like doing. Maybe it's the way I interact with females, and he sees a lot of flaws in that. And then I take offense and I'm like, I'm just talking to him. He's like, no, you're grooming him to fucking hit on him later. You, whatever, right? Like, and then I have to take that information and go discern it and go, fuck, is he right? And really under self-examination and serious reflection, I'm like, fuck, he's right. And then to go back and admit to him that he's right, that's like humiliating and painful. And then as I interact with women from there on, I'm like humbled in each interaction because the awareness brought to that defect is so strong that now I'm aware. And how do I interact with these people, these women? And I'm just using women as an example because it's easy, but it could be at work. It could be about getting validation at work, so I get a raise, so I look better, throwing workers under the bus. It could be, you know, even at home, trying to manipulate my parents to give me money or give me a place to live or whatever it is. So I have to learn through maybe not talking to women, even though I've been a smoozer for years, and learn my lesson that I don't have the right to affect them. Or, you know, it could work out in many different ways, but I have to learn through the humiliation, admission of some of these behaviors and people telling me. And then through the pain of not acting in that, not getting what it is that I think I want, because maybe he's right. As I looked at my pattern of my life, maybe it was like, okay, yeah, I fucking did do that. And I did fuck her, and I did fuck her, and I did fuck her. And I did that same tactic with all of them. So it's like an ingrained behavior that's in my being that I use in my life to get some type of validation and feed my ego. So now that I'm aware of that, and then I don't do it, there's a lot of pain attached to that, because part of my instincts want my peers of guys to fucking think how cool I am because of these women that I've been with, right? So now I don't even look cool to the guys. I'm not getting what my ego wants out of the woman. And like, there's a lot of pain in that. The thing about this journey is I'm going counterculture, because as I see other people doing exactly what I was doing, because it's not like I was the only one ever doing it. I see other people doing it, and now I can't. So now that pain is fucking something to learn from. And that's like really the essence of recovery, is going down that road that nobody's going down and suffering the pain of character building to the point where you get to this line where it says, it brings a measure of humility, which we soon discovered to be the healer of pain. The level of humility that you gain down the road by all this pain, it's a freedom that the intellectual mind can't understand. It's a freedom of the bondage of self. It's a freedom of the human spirit. And it's something that only happens through what we're talking about. And the first beginning step of that is a step 5. And then continual step 5s, which means like all day, every day for the rest of your life kind of deal. But they change.
Yeah, I want to just add one more thing to that, because it's really important, is that if you're using things outside of yourself, the pain of stopping that behavior, it's painful, because you're then left with yourself, and then you have to go to God, right? So it's like when I ended the relationship, I was in that affair for years, like 6 or 7 or 8 years. And I loved him very much, but it was by nature, it was toxic because of what it was. And when I was going through the process of not acting out in that, which looked like just even the texts, it was like I was texting and then I would start the whole thing going, or I would just be texting and having these conversations, but I was never able to just end it because that was so terrifying. And so when I did some specific step work around this with my sponsor, she was like, well, how did this, like, we really broke it down, and what would I do instead? She's big on that, to change your action moving forward. And so what it was every time I was going to go reach out for that, when I was feeling a malady, the restless, irritable discontent, which felt like border lonely at the time. And it was like bored, lonely, and scared, because I was in recovery. Right. And it was all I had left from, like, I wasn't using alcohol. I wasn't using drugs. I was alone in a basement suite, and I was feeling very uncertain and lost. And it was something that was known to me and very comforting. But I knew if I wanted what I wanted, which was, like, well, at the time it was his recovery, and I wanted to get to Calgary, and I wanted to do this for real. If I wanted what this program promised, I had to let go of everything. And so that was something that was, I mean, so painful. And it was a sticky note beside my bedpost. And it was like, what will I do instead? So instead of reaching for my phone to text, I mean, it was like coming out of my skin, loneliness and wanting some relief. And instead I would call my sponsor, hang out with my kids, call my mom, take the dogs for a walk. Like, I had this list of what would I do instead. And it took a couple of months of just, I held on to that list like a lifeline, like a Like I was like drowning in a river, and it was this raft that was going to save my life, that little Post-it. And I didn't believe at the time that I would ever be able to get out of that relationship. I didn't think I could ever unlove him. I didn't think I would ever be able to live without him. And like, it was a lot, and it was so painful. And so that's where, 6 and 7, it's like, are we going to be choosing comfort or character building? That's what the book says. It's like, and that's what this is with step 6. It's like, when the defects come up, they're actually the comfort. Our defects are the comfort. They're the relief. We're acting in defects because we need relief, and we're using ourselves to get what we need. And that isn't God's will. And so to let that go and to choose character building, well, that's painful. Character building is very painful. And if I didn't know what was coming up ahead, like if I didn't know that this was the process, and Bill had said to me, like this, be prepared because this is painful. He said, this 6, 7 stuff is no joke. It's like the book goes on and on about how, just different, like he's building an archway that we're going to pass with it. So that whole idea of building, well, we're demolishing ourselves. Like it comes with the steps are designed for ego deflation and this demolishing of self, and that's painful. And so to hold on to that Post-it note and that idea that this is worth it in the end, because I'm going to not be scared of pain, like Bill was talking about. If I do this right, if I just go through this, like instead of the short-term gratification, and I do a long-term, like just, goal of, if I get through this pain now, short-term pain will be long-term gain instead of short-term gain, long-term pain. And I just like, that was what I was looking at it like with everything, with all my defects. I was doing that with it, like that whole idea of like short-term pain will be long-term gain. And that comforted me. And I knew that from him telling me that this was how it was, and reading me out of the 12 by 12, because there's not a lot of stuff in 6 and 7. So anyways, when he's talking about the pain and doing the stuff differently, when we're getting a glimpse of self, and that's what that looks like. When he mentioned pain, it's painful because we're choosing character building over comfort, because our comfort zone is deadly. Nothing grows there. And in fact, that's where we lived, and we didn't like our lives there. So I think that the idea of choosing something different, regardless of how frightening and uncertain you feel about it, it's going to lead you in a better direction.
And on that note, and this is across the board, you can look at this literature and it makes sense, but to do it is another story. And like, she would hear me say it and she would be like, yeah, that sounds good. But she had believed in me. Like, she believed that I was telling the truth. So, but that's no guarantee for you guys on the screen or for her at the time. There's no guarantee that that's actually the truth. It's like it's a total leap of faith to trust that this program and what we're saying is actually true, because you don't know that it's true. And as you're living in that pain that's unremitting, it almost seems like, what's the fucking point anyway? Like it's too much. But I'll tell you this, that the pain and the lesson is only of the ego. It's not of the spirit. So the pain that you go through is the lesson of the ego, and it actually does end when you learned part of your lesson, or maybe your whole lesson. And, I think because the program and the book has actually developed so much passion within me, passion within Janine, passion within Michael W., Shane. There's many people on the screen that I know that are living this, but they weren't really sure at first, right? So I'd like to do something here. Michael W., would you be okay to come online for a sec? So I'm going to bring Michael on for a second. And he was one of the guys that came on, and he had been, to treatment and came on here, and he's, Christian. So he had this God and blah, blah, blah. But then he came on and he was like, this guy actually believes what the fuck he's talking about. He believes his own shit. He's like, this is kind of different. And what we like to do on this big book study and in the meetings that we do is we like to empower people that this is yours. You can have this too. But it takes a lot of hard work. And so, Michael, if you could share like your experience with like, coming into like the group of meetings that you came into and then seeing the people and going, holy shit, this is different than what I've seen out there. And then you putting in your own hard work and then how it's paid dividends for you and not being guaranteed any of the gifts of it either. Can you do that?
Sure. Yeah, my name is Mike and I'm an alcoholic addict. Yeah, like Bill said, I'm a Christian, and I had a spiritual experience in my life when I was 29, and the desire for me to drink was lifted out of me. I didn't know anything about AA other than the fact that I didn't want to go there, and things happened in my life that my spiritual life got a little weak, and I drank. I said to my wife, can I drink? Can I have a glass of wine? Anyway, like Bill said, I ended up in treatment. I drank for about 8 years. In the last 5, I was pretty much drunk for 5 years. I went to treatment, and I knew what had saved me from this problem. I knew I was an alcoholic, but I couldn't find my way back there. And the treatment place I went had nothing to do with spirituality. It was a different kind of a program, and it was all about what I could, mantras and hungry, angry, lonely, tired, and all this other shit. And I knew I got home, I was 3 months sober, but I knew I didn't have solid sobriety. And it was the beginning of COVID. My wife was leaving. I went online and I was doing Zoom meetings, and so thankful that I stumbled into Bill's big book study. And I truly remember sitting through that thing, and I thought, holy shit, this guy actually believes this stuff. This higher power thing. He really believes that God can do something in the life of a person. And I didn't have a sponsor at that time. I mean, I was 3 months sober, and but I knew I wasn't solid, so I stuck around. I got a sponsor, and I went through the steps. And just this journey through the steps, I was so blocked up with resentments and all those things. The character defects were rampant, and I couldn't hear God's voice anymore. And this program and taking it for real, understanding that this is life and freaking death, literally. Maybe I won't be 6 feet under, but I'll freaking wish I was almost. And changed my life. And just the clearing of that channel and the clearing and I mean, we're on step 5, that was a big part of it. And just the whole realization that without this, I was screwed, and there was no getting back. And this led me back to a place where I could connect with God again, and it's changed my life. And I hated it when I heard people say that AA has changed my life. I thought, what a crock of shit. I never believed it, but it's freaking changed my life. And I'm so grateful to Bill and well, not Bill, but yeah, Bill. But anyway,
But to Janine.
And I've met some amazing people here. You really used to. I thought, I mean, AA was the last place on the planet I ever wanted to go. I thought, I didn't know what to expect. I'm freaking 60 now. I was 58, 55, something like that when I came in here, and it's a life changer. but we gotta frickin' surrender and lay it down or it won't work. So I don't know, Bill, is that what you want?
Yeah, dude, that's what I want. And why I wanted you is because you took this to another level. And then in the We Agnostic, it said intelligent agents, spearheads of God's ever advancing creation. And you've taken that as an intelligent agent, which means a collector of data, collector of information, and you're a spearhead for your creator. And in many respects, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're living part of your best life today through service to creator and doing this inventorying, doing the hard shit. And like, that's what the message is that I want to get to the people that are on the Zoom. Like, don't do what's normal. Whatever the program and most of the people are doing in the program, don't do that. That's normal. And if you do what's normal, you'll get with the results of what the most of the program is getting, and that's getting drunk. So you got to do something a little exceptional. And doing that character building is the hard work, but it builds that exceptional life. And this literature that seems like it's like it makes sense and it's kind of corny because it's so fucking, you know, why would they write that? That sounds like the Bible or whatever. No, there's some literal reality in this literature, and it actually takes you to a fourth dimension that when I first read that, I thought it was a bunch of bullshit. But this is the best life that I've ever lived. And like, you know, to have friends like Janine and Michael and Shane and a lot of these people that are like in my pillar system and my friends, like they'll do anything for me and I'll do anything for them. And that's the kind of authentic friends that you want, but you got to be authentic too. And the only way through authenticity to the truth is through your ego to God within you, right? So that's why I wanted you to kind of talk about that, Michael.
All right, so the bottom of 74. Notwithstanding the great necessity for discussing ourselves with someone, it may be one is so situated that there's no suitable person available. If that is so, the step may be postponed only, however, if we hold ourselves in complete readiness to go through with it at the first opportunity. We say this because we are very anxious that we have this talk with the right person. It is important that he be able to keep a confidence that he fully understand and approve what we are doing, and that he will not try to change up our plan. But we must not use this as a mere excuse to postpone. When we decide who is to hear our story, we waste no time. We have a written inventory and we are prepared for a long talk. We explain to our partner what we are about to do and why we have to do it. He should realize that we are engaged upon a life and death errand. Most people approached in this way will be glad to help and will be honored by our confidence. We pocket our pride and go with it, illuminating every twist of character, every dark cranny of the past. Once we have taken this step, withholding nothing, we are delighted. We can look the world in the eye. We can be alone at perfect peace and ease. Our fears fall from us. We begin to feel the nearness of Creator. We may have had a certain spiritual belief, but now we begin to have a spiritual experience. The feeling that the drink problem has disappeared will often come strongly. We feel that we are on the broad highway, walking hand in hand with the spirit of the universe.
Okay. So going back to where Janine started, one line up from there, it said the rule is that we must be hard on ourselves, but considerate of others. So this is kind of like a bone of contention in the program. Oh, I need to be really gentle on myself. I need to love myself. I need to like look at all my assets and look at all the good parts of me. Yeah, okay, that might be true, but the book tells me I need to be hard on myself. This is about being hard on myself. This is where like this program kind of gets the results that I think that it gets in a good way, if you're following the direction. Because the directions are actually trying to get you to identify self and then kind of out yourself. So we are to be hard on ourselves. And I'll say this also, a lot of us in the program, myself included, in those early years, especially when we first get here, even though we may not even admit it, there's a lot of like self-hatred. There's a lot of like, I don't really like myself. And pride might actually be delivering that I'm really good with myself. But the truth of the matter is, and I've done enough step fives to see this to be true, most people aren't good with who they are, especially when they come here. And the self-love that you need in this program at some point, it usually doesn't come right away. It doesn't come in the first year. Okay. It doesn't come till like you've worked a really solid program for a while, and the self-love will eventually come, but it doesn't come at first. No matter what people tell you, just love yourself, just love yourself. I can't love you until I love myself and I'm fucking 3 months sober. That's bullshit. That guy that just said that doesn't actually love himself. He doesn't actually know what he's talking about. He's talking out his ass, but that's okay. We're allowed to here. We'll listen. Right?
This
But
is this
go-
is why if you've ever had a person tell you to put an affirmation on a mirror and say like, I love you, or you're beautiful, or whatever it is, right? If you have affirmations on your mirror, but you're not taking any action, you can affirm yourself till the cows come home, and you're not going to feel any better because you go out into the world and you do the same things. So this is like the action around how you make the affirmations come true. So if you want to be if you want to be like I am a good friend, I love myself, I am a good mother, all those things. This is the action part that will make the affirmations on the mirror stand true. And like that's often used in the realm of self-esteem building. And I think it could be a part of it, I suppose. Somebody could argue me on this, but I think it's a waste, because esteem is only built through esteemable acts. Like you have to have good action to create good character and to have the good sense of self-esteem. So in thinking about that and in trying to talk yourself into that, it just doesn't work. So this program is the program of action. And as a result, affirmations blend into this program really nicely, because you will start to believe your affirmations on the mirror.
And yeah, eventually, just like she said, you know, I will start loving myself down the road, but I have to expose the truth first. And I need to be hard on myself. And like around year 2 or year 3, you know, it will really change, and there will be a lot of self-love, and the asset part of your recovery is really important to look at that point. But don't like ever forget that we are still to be hard on ourselves. I'm still hard on myself in a way, but I've also learned how to balance like the self-love and the assets of myself to like balance it all much better. Okay.
I was driving with my daughter, I don't know, 6 months ago or so, and I was still in Medicine Hat, so maybe that was longer. But anyways, it was longer, because she was just finishing up grade 12. And so it would have been May. And she was going on to me about this is hard and that's hard. And, you know, my grandma and her great grandma had passed, and that really actually shook her. And she really used that. My mommy's an alcoholic and my grandma died. She used that for the whole grade 12 year. And, you know, that worked for her until it didn't. And that's just how the defects are, right? Where it's like that worked for her, and then it turned on her and it cut her to ribbons, where then we were approaching the end of grade 12 and she was very stressed out because she hadn't done any real work, and then she had to do provincials, and there was no more slack to give her. Now it was like, hey, you gotta perform, you have no choice. She was having this mini meltdown in the car, and I had just listened to a podcast, and the guy was talking about how if you're not doing good and the person's like, it's okay, because you're good, like you just got to chin up and really just do your best, and you know, you're okay. And that's not actually what a person needs to hear, or probably wants to hear on an unconscious level, because that would bring more anxiety, and it does, because that's not the best you can do, and you're not okay. And so that really resonated with me. And so I said to her, I'm like, this is not your best. Like you're actually like, this isn't because grandma died or because mommy was an alcoholic. This is because you're lazy. This is because you don't prioritize properly. And this has happened. This was long before this has been happening since grade 8. And you need to actually have some discipline around studying and around this and around that. And like, you're capable than so much more than this. And I reminded her of this time that she thought that she was not as smart as everyone else. And I reminded her of a time that she had done a test where they just tested for that. And she tested like in the 20th percentile of her class. And that was just at a test to get a baseline. And then what happens? She doesn't try. And then she's getting low grades and reaffirming that she's not intelligent. So I just gave her the straight truth. Like, I was really hard on her, and it was counterintuitive to what I would normally do because I had so much guilt in my alcoholism that I was overcompensating in all the ways. I couldn't have the hard conversations because I felt so guilty about my performance as a mother that I would never wanted to hurt feelings or to have her say, yeah, but you do this. And my side of the street was not clean ever. So I couldn't have the hard conversations because my side of the street was a mess and it would be thrown at me. And the kids wouldn't take me seriously because why would they? When my whole life is a mess and I'm saying you got to do better. And it's like, okay. And they're so resentful and this and that. But this time she really listened to me because she could see at this point that my recovery was for real and that I was getting better. And she heard it. And now today, like she reflects back on that as something that was actually motivating, and it wasn't demotivating, and hearing the truth about her and what she was doing and how she was causing her own failure actually was a motivation for her to do better. And I wouldn't have been able to have that conversation with her in addiction because of my own guilt and my side of the street not being clean. So that's another benefit of being in recovery as a parent, because you're able to actually parent with truth and love instead of guilt and love, because the results of that are very, very different. So.
Okay, so moving on, that bottom paragraph talks about there's no suitable person available. This step may be postponed only, however, if we keep ourselves in complete readiness to go through with it at the first opportunity. The basic message behind that is, after you're done a step 4, don't wait around. Don't wait around. Like, this was written in 1939. We don't have that issue really today. You have a step 4 written. Don't wait, because step 4 is the biggest relapse step in the program. You've stirred up some, issues within your subconscious that need to be dealt with and spoken about, and have God brought into these conversations so that you can get free and move past and keep moving. If you postpone the step 5 for too long, you don't really get it, but you'll probably drink. And if you don't drink, you'll go through some emotional turmoil for sure, which is unnecessary. And we're trying to clear this channel quickly, right? Because we're only at step 5 here. We haven't had a spiritual awakening. We're just beginning to have spiritual awakenings in the step 5. Okay.
Returning home?
No. Top of the page, 75. Talks about when we decide to who is to hear our story, we waste no time. So as soon as you're done your 4, don't waste any time. Even if you got to go to the priest or to the mount and get it off your chest, like, just go do it. Okay. We have written an inventory and we are prepared for a what? A long talk. That's the benefit of using your sponsor. And when I work with somebody, I just went through 4 or 5 weeks of a step 1, discussing their life intimately in drinking and usually within relationships. And I've gotten to know the person pretty good through the step 1. I've just done a step 2 and a step 3. And now we work through your step 4. So I'm like a month and a half into this relationship, probably getting to know you better than anyone's ever gotten to know you. Maybe it's 2 months, right? Now we can engage in a long talk because I know a lot about your life, your parents, your kids, your wife, your experience with your jobs, your experience with drinking and being a menace to your own self and society. And we need to have the long talk. And when I have a long talk with the sponsee, how I do this is I sit down when we start. As soon as the 4 is done, I do a quick review and I'm like, okay, here's the date for the 5. And usually, hopefully it's within 2 weeks or a week. And then we're sitting down to do the 5. I book a whole day out for the 5. I don't book 2 hours or 4 hours or 6 hours. I give the whole day pretty much almost every time, because I don't know how long this is going to take. And I do not want to break up a step 5. We pray, we ask God to come in and do what he needs to do in this step 5. And then they start going through their resentments. And when I'm getting them to do their step 4, I usually get them to put all their family stuff first, because I need to mostly talk about the family when I start talking about the step 5 with the sponsee, because the family actually contains a lot of the data that I need to see how the person was brought up and where they were, whatever issues, emotional deformities, and these kind of things that have happened, belief systems, the way they treat women or men, or how they view money or jobs and careers. And like, there's so much that comes out of getting to know the parents. So there's a long talk involved here. And for me, usually a step 5 will take at least 7 hours to sometimes up to 15 hours. Usually that's kind of the average, right? We explain to our partner, blah, blah, blah. We don't really need to read that. Most people approaching this way, be glad to help. They will be honored by our confidence. Do you want to share anything on how you prep for a 5 before we go into that last paragraph?
Yeah, I was just kind of thinking about just how my 5s have been mishmash, because I was doing my first sponsoring out of a treatment center and they only allotted for like 3 hours, which is nuts. So I caught on to how nuts that was quickly. And then I started doing it a little bit differently, because you could go in and you could, as a sponsor, you could do things differently. So I would wait until there was a longer time than just the 3 hours in the evening. And then we would do it on the weekend, and 6 hours minimum. I would say 6 hours is like minimum. And just trying to think, I have a sponsee on here that's out of town, and we did one that was in the evening, I think. Was trying to recall it, and it was rushed, and then I feel like you have to go back, and so that's not ideal. And I've found that when people come and they've already gone through the steps, or they're in process of steps switching sponsors, which happens, that I've learned to go back like and review their 4. I've made the mistake with that, where I've like started on a 5 and then it wasn't making a whole ton of sense, and then it was like hours in. We are like hours in. I would say we were like 9 hours in before I finally asked to see the paper, because it was confusing, because she had just been holding it. And that step 5 was also a mishmash, because then we went back through and then we finished that 5 very late in the evening, like 1 a.m. driving around until some lights changed, because there was one particular resentment that took a long time to switch over. So we were just driving around. So mine have been very mishmash. And so now it would be 6 hours minimum. And I would review the 4 for sure if I didn't set it up myself. I don't have any sort of order with the 4. I say write the resentments. The reason that I don't say like write your family first or do it chronologically is because when I look at the resentments, the first 3, I know those are the most powerful ones on their radar. So I don't want to contaminate that insight by telling them to list it in a certain way. I say just start writing and then stop when you're done. Because I get a lot of clues on where to pack the punch in those first resentments. So that's what I do. And I don't know if there's anything else specific that I would add. That's about it for now.
Can you add something about treatment center step 5 versus general sponsorship, sponsee relationships step 5?
Yeah, so when I guess my experience in treatment was that I had to go, at least I was allowed to go to meetings and like find somebody. I didn't have a whole ton of time to do that. I only had 2 weeks, and I could only go to a few meetings a week. So it was like pick one that was available kind of thing. And it's just kind of a gamble, because at that point I didn't know much about the program or the person. So it was a gamble. And again, I think that my own willingness, I would have made whatever work, because I was dead set on getting it this time. But the actual experience of that was very awkward, because we hadn't developed any type of rapport. It was like, can you come to Sunrise and can you do this thing with me? And they knew what they were doing. But it just is very different when there's not a backstory. My sponsor has me always go to page 90. It's in working with others, and it's like when you discover on page 90, when you discover a prospect for Alcoholics Anonymous, find out all you can about him. And she really pushes that point about like, how did they drink and where did they drink and what was their hangovers like? And in that whole conversation, lots of things come up. Like you hear about the family being mad, and you hear about their self-pity, or you hear about their blackout anger, or you hear about their ex, or you just hear a lot of things, and just even getting the general sense of their drinking. And I found that was very valuable. That's probably something I wouldn't have even thought to ask, is like, what did your drinking look like? I don't know if I would have spent a ton of time there, but I did it just after she told me that. And it just brought forward so many things that I was like, wow, this explains like a lot of things. And so I think that doing it in a treatment center, it is what it is. I would always recommend doing another round of steps after. As a sponsor going into treatment, I've changed it up. So if I go into this treatment center, I do 3 sessions. So I go in and I do some of the 1 actually, because I know I'm not going to get a full 5 and I know that they're going to be in treatment. So what I really want to talk to them about when I have their attention in that treatment center is step 1. And I want them to know the grave nature of the illness. And so that to me is more important than hearing their 5 in a rush. So I do that, and I do like a really solid 1. And I've learned that just because of trial and error and just kind of getting more familiar with the program and then being like, this doesn't make a ton of sense. And so I've just adjusted it like that. Now, when I sponsor from the beginning is I've through step 1 and like through working with others, there's a lot of points there that get you to discuss, like just you get to know them. And from that, you're able to really give a meaningful and accurate contribution to the 5. And by then you're able to, I guess that would be another really big point is if you don't know somebody, you can't call them out in the same way. There's no attachment to the person, like there's no relationship. So you're just going to be offending them, and they're not going to listen because you haven't had the trust. And a lot of this is sharing your own experience as a sponsor, and you don't have time to do that either. So it's piecemeal, and it is what it is, and go back and do another round if you were in treatment. But yeah, so it's always better to do a fresh set of steps with someone. That's where I start now instead of in the middle. That's about it.
And then one thing, so if you're sponsoring on here and you're just getting into these step 5s, because it takes time to kind of build systems in step 5s and how to do them and be really effective and blah, blah, blah. I think the most important thing for anyone new doing step 5s is just to be God-centered. And when you start the 5s, pray, get the other person to pray and get them to pray out loud too. That's one thing that I've noticed that's really been a major advantage for me, getting to know people and getting them to know themselves as them praying out loud. And in that 5, it's really good. They voice their real authentic self because they want this to work, right? And then you start, and you just start somewhere. So maybe if you're new and you're hearing us saying, okay, here's the minimum 6 hours and mine's 7, and you're at like 2.5 hours and you guys are ending, and this is like your second step 5 and you're trying to stretch it to be 5 or 8 hours, don't worry about it, right? Just, you'll figure it out as time goes on. Just do the best that you can and ask people that are doing these, the questions that you need to ask. Like I get calls all the time from people. Okay, I'm going to do a step 5. Do you have any advice? Or I did the step 5. This is what happened. How could I do it better next time, or whatever, right? And often I've been asked to sit in on people's step 5s. Michael and I have sat in and we've done a couple together, and and now he doesn't ask me ever for help, right? Because he probably is doing a great job. But we rely on each other and we help each other. And that's how we get better and better and do this at another level.
Yeah, that's a good point, is that I've sat in on, like I have a couple of girls that were sponsoring out of the same treatment center that I sponsored. And I said, ask them if they're comfortable, if you're feeling like you're unsure, if I can come in, and it was always fine. Nobody said no, because they want it. Like if somebody's willing to get sober and to do this work, they want more hands on deck. I think, like if there's a sponsor who got this person sober, I would want that person because they would feel a little bit more experienced. So sure, the more the merrier, So I haven't had it where somebody's asked for if I could sit in and it's been a no. And I've also had, there's a friend of mine that does do a little bit of sponsoring of women, not Bill, someone else. And asked me if I would step in and help out with it, because there's just some things that a woman can speak to more, understand in a different way. And so we did that together, and that was the only one time that I've done like a co-ed one, and it was really It was really good. So we don't have to do this alone. And so if you ask for help, like help will be given, and that's always an option.
Roger. Okay. And you read this whole paragraph,
Yeah,
right?
we're at returning home.
Okay, we pocketed our pride and we went at it, illuminating every twist of character, every dark cranny of the past. Once we have taken this step, withholding nothing. So assuming we have just done the step 5 and we held nothing back and we talked about every dark cranny of the past. And that's the whole purpose of a step 5 is our secrets keep us sick. So we're telling our sponsor and God all of our secrets. And hopefully the sponsee, whoever that might be on the screen, or the sponsee that you're working with, hopefully they're going to tell you everything. And they might not tell you everything. Okay. And that's kind of common. But what you do right at the end of your step 5 is you say, okay, we're done the 5 part. Now, if anything comes up that you haven't told me about, please get in touch with me over the next week or something, because a lot of times as we do this work, the spirit wants it to come up, but you might not have remembered here today, but your spirit will push it up and it'll want to be dealt with. So don't keep it to yourself. Just call me and we can discuss it. Or if you're holding anything back and you're not telling me, you know what, really think about that and really let them know, like, you just want the best for them and you don't really care. And then how many times, it's been an hour or two after the step 5 and I get the call, or it's the next day. And the guy's like, hey, this is something I didn't talk to you about. And they kind of out themselves because they understand this is really important. This is life and death shit. So their conscience or the spirit will push it up to the surface, and then they'll tell you about it.
That's super common with my treatment center sponsees. And the reason for that is just that there hasn't been enough rapport for me to feel safe yet. And so they give me what they can, and then they wait to see if I do what I do with that, or if I'm still there, or like how it goes, and they recover some more. And then they, by then we've developed a relationship of trust, and they're able to say, hey, and I totally get it, because it was such a piecemeal experience, and in a way that the book isn't actually, it's not how we're supposed to do it. So I do say that when I leave, like, I'm like, just so you know, this was not the way the book says, and we should have had a lot more relationship going on, but you can trust me completely with what you told me here today. And so I'm going to go on, and everything here stays in the room except for what I need to help you moving forward. If you haven't mentioned anything and it comes up, please tell me. And it's a slower process to tell me, because they have to get out into the real world, I think, and then really see me out in the real world. And so most of the treatment center girls that I've sponsored have said something after they've marbled out, and it's been something later, and that's okay, because like, as long as you're willing and you come forward with it, and by then there's a relationship, and there's, then that information is helpful. And by then I have a sense of who they are as well. And so you got to make do in a treatment center sponsoring. It's totally different than what the book says. Like, it's very, very different. And so I think to bring as much book into the treatment center sponsoring, if that's where you're going to be helpful, to bring as much book back. And if you're doing something like, I try to bring as much, this is actually what the book says to do, but the treatment center is doing it like this, just for time's sake or whatever, why we're doing it. But I recommend doing it this way after you're out, and doing it properly, and just letting them know that the results that they're getting through their set of steps in a treatment center is not actually probably going to bring the results of what's going on here, just because it's not done in the way that the book has laid it out to do.
Hey, Bill, can I ask one quick question, please, just on sponsorship?
Go for it.
So I'm taking a man through step 5. What information on Into Action am I reading up to before I jump into the 5? Do I read the whole chapter, or am I stopping there at that top of 75 paragraph?
Okay, say that again. Let me pay attention this time.
Okay, so I'm taking a man through step 5. What information am I reading out of So I'm taking a man through the book. What information out of Into Action am I reading up to before going into the actual talk on 5?
Okay, good question. Really good question. This is how I do it, okay? When I start a step 5 and we start at, like we're starting, this is what I do. I start at the beginning of the step 5 and I read all the way up to where we just finished, withholding nothing. And I stop right there, okay? So that's at the very beginning of the 5. I read everything and I stop right there. And then I say, okay, now we're going back into the material into step 4. I go back to step 4 and I start reading the resentment, all the material on the resentments. Okay. Like right from the end of step 3, I start reading and then I get to the resentments and then it's like, bust out your book. Let's talk about the resentments. And then when I'm doing the resentments, I'm really focused on page 67, referring to our list again, putting out of our minds the wrongs others had done. We resolutely looked for our own mistakes. Where were we selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, or frightened? Though the situation had not been entirely our fault, we tried to disregard the other person involved entirely. Where were we to blame? So I might almost even read that over and over and over and over and over as we get to the 4th column. Where were you to blame? Putting out of your mind entirely, bro, of the wrong somebody else did to you. What's your part in this, right? And so I go over and over. And why I do it like that? Because the answer for my life lies in the book. This guy needs to know that the answer isn't me. The answer's in the book and it's God. It's not me. So I keep taking him to the book. And then once we're done the resentments, and he's got that shit ingrained in his consciousness because we read it over and over and over, then we get into fears. And then we read the fears. And I do the same thing. Same thing with the sex conduct. And then once we're done all of that step 5 work that we're reading in the 4, then I go back to, we can look the world in the eye. We are delighted. We can look the world in the eye. We can be alone at perfect peace and ease. And then we read that. And that's how we finish off the 5. And I go into the returning home where it goes into the 6 and 7. And then I send them home. And we'll kind of go through that a little bit right now. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, man. Thank you very much.
Roger.
I do the same with, I go back and I read it out right out of the book so they know where this is coming from, but also that they know what the solution is for that, right? So that they have a resentment and then it's going to introduce like the resentment prayer. And so I talk about, I bring in the spiritual tools. Like I say, this book says, we're going to go on, we pick up the kit of spiritual tools or we go on to the bitter end. Well, the spiritual tools is a bunch of actual like tricks, and one of them is this resentment prayer, and one of them is the fear prayer, and one of them, right? So I start introducing these prayers as tools, and just getting that whole concept, because what pick up this the kit of spiritual tools is so kind of, what are we doing here? And so I really want to bring that home so they know what they're actually supposed to be doing when they're tackling the problems in life. This is the other way. The spiritual way is to do this, and this will get you these results. And so I start bringing that in and really separating, like, this is resentment, this is what it looks like, this is what you do in the program with resentment.
Bill, Janine, I have a quick question. So I get a lot of guys from the treatment center that I went through, and Janine, you were saying about the treatment center set of steps, it's not the same as out of the book. But I find that guys in treatment centers are really slow to get a sponsor. They're really slow to want to get started steps out of the book. And it really conflicts with their program and the program. And you were saying about starting after treatment for a set of steps.
Yeah.
How would I convey that to him and be like, well, you can do the treatment, when you're done treatment, we'll start the steps. Is that okay? Because it does conflict a lot, trying to time everything out, and their ego reattaching and stuff like that. How do I deal with that?
Well, I think just exactly what you're saying is the more that you can say, this is what we're doing here, but this is different than what the book says. We're kind of doing it in a way that isn't exactly out of the book, and therefore the results aren't what the book is promising. In whatever way you can say that, sometimes people in treatment don't want to do the steps, even though it's a 12-step treatment center. They don't want to because they think it's religious, or they have an issue with God, or they don't have an understanding of step one. I know at the treatment center I was at, they didn't like, they brought the literature, but it wasn't like presented in a way where, okay, I have this and I need this. And I knew I needed it and I wanted it, but I don't know how it would have come across. I didn't actually get step one until I was out of treatment, where I was, oh, okay, this is like a big deal. And where step one actually was what really stuck to me, where I'm like, okay, I got step one, was understanding, why does an alcoholic drink? Why? So I was always hung up on the allergy, and that was how I identified it within treatment. And I still didn't feel like anything had really changed for me. But then when I heard it in a meeting later outside of treatment, and then really getting into my second set of steps, I heard but why does he drink? Well, you ask him and he'll say, I don't know. And he's probably telling you the truth. He doesn't know. I was like, holy shit. I'm like, this is me. I totally get this. And that was the missing piece for me. So I guess going back to your question is like, in a treatment center, you're getting all kinds of pieces from the book. You're not getting an alcoholic sitting down with another alcoholic and going through the book. And so as a result, you're getting pieces of everything. Like, I know I have a friend who went to a treatment center, that it was a man's treatment center, and they were doing step 10s at night, but they were not step 10s. I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, that is not a step 10. Like, why are you doing like da, 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 da? And I did the same worksheet in treatment, and I thought that was a step 10, and it was like a weird blend of 10 and 11 on a worksheet, which is like totally treatment center. But yeah, so people come out of there not understanding what it is, and then they're not getting results, of course. So just to give the message, however you can, that there's different results if you do it differently, try it. Just to put that bug in their head that you're not actually doing 12-step, even though this is 12-step, like how we're going through it is not the way that it's designed to do. So the results are not what they are, because you don't want them leaving treatment thinking that they did 12 steps. Because that's like what happened to me. And I knew that I hadn't done 12 steps because I couldn't explain step 6 or 7 in a meeting. So I knew that I had missed something, because when you know something, you're able to talk about it. And I was like, oh my God, if it comes to step 6, I don't know what I'm saying. It's only a paragraph in the book. I don't know what I'm doing. So I must not know. And then I started looking for what the answer was. And that kind of led me on my post-treatment journey. So I think, like, just to communicate that the book is designed to give the results of an alcoholic and another alcoholic reading the book. And the treatment center can mishmash it and piecemeal it. And if they're not going to do it here, know that they didn't try it. This wasn't it. So if they go out there and they're relapsing and they need a solution, don't think that they've done this and it doesn't work. That's the message, is that you don't want them leaving thinking that they've done 12-step and it didn't work for them.
So I'm going to add to that. So one of the things that I say that really pisses off treatment center guys and the counselors that bring them to the meetings, as I see like 20 or 30 treatment center guys in the meeting at our home group on Monday night. And I'm like, hey, welcome to you treatment center guys. I say, enjoy your free fucking sobriety. Because that's what you're getting. You're getting free sobriety. You're not really working like the steps, how they're actually designed. One of the examples is what Janine said. They teach the treatment center guys that step 10s are actually a nightly inventory, which is step 11. That is not step 10. And if they just go on the aspect that they think that they've done the 12 steps, typically they haven't really conceded to their innermost self, because the material wasn't presented deeply enough and one-on-one enough, and looking in the heart connection of one-on-one, that they're pretty much fucked and the gates of hell have closed on them with the clang. That hasn't happened. And then there's many things about the rest of the steps that don't actually happen. So the answer to your question is just tell them, just say, this is good that you're here. This is like a free place to get structure and kind of get familiar with the steps. But if you really want value out of this in your life, then you know, put on your list that doing a real set of steps outside of here with a sponsor is at the top of your list. And don't be afraid, because you're not harming them by telling them the truth, because that's the truth. Go ahead, Paul.
Thank you,
Thank you, guys.
guys.
My only question is that if someone is approaching sobriety for the first time and they're doing it through one of these treatment centers, they might not know the difference. So I find it rather unfair to tell them that whatever approach they're taking is inappropriate because it's not this exact 12-step program. Perhaps they're not familiar with anything else, and this is their first experience with exploring sobriety.
Yeah.
So, I mean, to say that you see those people there and it's sort of like, oh, okay, welcome, but not a big deal. Well, maybe it is for them. And maybe they don't quite understand the way that it works through this program. So,
Okay.
so I think that perhaps some understanding is a little bit necessary. And I didn't see a lot of that in the last thing that you said.
Okay.
And that's all. I'm not trying to be rude, but
No, dude, that's totally fair, and we welcome that. But I'm going to answer it from my experience. Okay, I've seen enough people come in here and die by not understanding what the true predicament of this disease will do, and I've looked many men square in the eyes that are now dead 6 feet under, and I'm not just talking one or two. I'm talking like lots, and I see the misconception of the program and what people think the program is, and especially in the meetings, is not what the program is. And if these guys don't get a true understanding of their predicament and the truth about this, they will die. And they may not like what I have to say at first, and that's cool. But I'll tell you this, that they do eventually come to guys like me, because what they do gets them drunk and high over and over and over. So eventually they'll come and they'll want to know what the actual truth is. So I'm a truth bringer based on my own experience. And so I teach people that.
Well, and I think that you also really believe on what the book says, is that you disturb them on the level of alcoholism. And so the message is disturbing, like it definitely gets attention and it causes controversy. And I appreciate you actually bringing this up, Paul, because it definitely, I've heard so much of this and I've had to really contend with it myself in like my own opinion on Bill's approach. But I've been around long enough now in Calgary that it like he really does ruffle feathers and people go, oh, that fucking guy. And but they hear him and they hear him and they disagree. And then if they do stick around in like in the rooms and they struggle or they go back out and they relapse, they know that, oh, there was that guy who was talking about this, and people do come back to him and say, you know, so you have 1,000 people telling them, you know, welcome to treatment. And you know what, treatment was helpful for me. I got sober in treatment. So like, I don't think there's anything against treatment. It just, I needed more and I had to figure it out because it was a confusing jungle out there of 12-step. And I actually heard Bill disturbing a treatment center in this share at this. And I was like, holy shit. And he said some other things that was around step 6. And so I reached out to him and that's kind of how I met him, because he was loud and he was like doing his thing and he caught my attention. And I also didn't really have a good taste in my mouth about Bill at the beginning either, because I was like, I called him number 42 because that's how many swears I counted. I was like, oh, this guy again. But then I heard his message and it made sense, because I was at that place where I was like, okay, I think that guy has the message. And so the disturbing them on the level of alcoholism, if he gets somebody thinking and he actually has a message that people have some attention to and he's telling the truth, I think that, you know, I've seen people be attracted to that when they need it. And for the rest of them, I guess, like, I don't know what to say. So there's been people that like it has saved lives in that approach. So I do appreciate also what you're saying, because it's like people don't know, but those people are just going to get offended, and then they're going to listen to everybody else saying what they need to hear for that moment, right? But they'll remember the guy that disturbed them and said some things. And if they do need to call on him, he's there, and they will reach out because they remember. That's what I've seen happen, and I've seen it happen a lot. So.
And just two more things, Paul. In the book, it does say we disturb them on the question of alcoholism. This is all to the good. They then stand a better chance of accepting what we have to offer. And disturbing them on the question of alcoholism is this in the mind. And that's what I do. I ruffle the feathers. I disturb them on the question. And it wasn't the guy who shined my shoes that I remembered most of the time. It was the guy who cut me with his words in the meeting that I was like, whoa, that sounded like it hurt me, or I remembered. Right. But then on the other side of this coin, the program needs all types of people.
Mhm.
It needs the grandma, it needs the soft, it needs the compassion, it needs and the thing about me is I have a huge amount of compassion for people. But a lot of people, like in a meeting setting like this, would never really see that because they never can really get to know me. But we need all the people who are in the program because they all bring their gifts. And if that gift can work with that person because they're similar or they relate to it, then I think that's great. And I'm not here to push people away, but I'm not here to tell them, pat them on the back. It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. Because you know what? It's not going to be okay. And I've seen way too many guys die. And that's the passion that you hear. It's not that I want to like corral everyone to do it a certain way. I see how the book works, and like my experience as a sponsor, I have a great success rate as a sponsor of men sober today, right? And I see the regular results of the program and in society and their rates too. So that also plays a role. But thank you, my friend.
Mhm. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. So we're getting into the step 5 promises. So these are kind of the promises that we should expect after we're done a step 5. And these are very similar promises to the step 10 promises in a way. So I want you to kind of take a note of that. Once we have taken the step withholding nothing, we are delighted we can look the world in the eye. For years and years, I'm staring at the floor. I can't look people in the eye. And I finally let this go. And the first person I can look in the eye is the person that I just told it to. And then as time goes by, I can start lifting my head up. I'm not hanging my head in shame. And I feel okay with who I am, at least right now, right? However long this feeling lasts will actually depend on how much more work I do after this is done. Our fears will fall from us. We can be alone at perfect peace and ease. It's those thoughts in my own head that keep twisting me, and that I keep thinking about the past and the future and my actions and how these people are screwing me and how I've screwed them. And, there's no peace in my own mind. And that's part of the disease of alcoholism. When there's no peace in my mind says you need relief, what's always given it to you, and it says drugs or alcohol, and you need it now, which drives me, which is the powerlessness part of picking up the first drink. Like Janine talked about, she always kind of thought that this was about the allergy. Yeah, okay, it's partly about the allergy, but way more importantly, before the allergy is, why do I put the drink and the drug into my body and I'm stone cold sober? Because I'm not alone at perfect peace and ease within my own being. And my brain says, you need relief, you need it now, it's always given it to you, drugs and alcohol. Okay, it might have worked, but it doesn't work anymore. And then, but I can't not drink or use drugs, but I can't do it either. And then, like the book talks about, I get to a jumping off point. I can't imagine my life with it or without it. And I don't know what to do. I'm ready to blow my brains out. Right? So our fears will fall from us. We begin to feel the nearness of our Creator. There's some beautiful literature right there. The fears begin to fall away, and I begin to feel the nearness of my own Creator, because now I'm letting this stuff go. You may have had certain spiritual beliefs. That belief if you can think honestly, if you can search diligently within yourself, then if you wish, you can join us on the broad highway. With this attitude, you cannot fail. The consciousness of your belief is sure to come to you. Way back in We Agnostics, I may have had certain spiritual beliefs, but now we begin to have a spiritual experience. That belief, that mustard seed, now that I've searched diligently and I've gotten honest with myself, this thing turns into something more than a belief. It's now real. It turns real. The feeling that the drink problem has disappeared will often come strongly. Boom, that's what I'm looking for. We feel we are on the broad highway, walking hand in hand with the spirit of the universe. So there's some things that happen in the deep subconscious that really start making me feel alive, that vitality of life. Like I'm feeling like, okay, there's some real hope here. And a lot of times the spiritual experience through the step 5 is so great that we think we're actually well. And we'll really let off the gas at this point of the program. Because if you put me on a lie detector test, I'm going to tell you I'm never drinking again. The person who says they're never drinking again and they're good, they don't understand their true predicament of this illness. Essentially, they don't understand step 1 still. So, and a lot of these promises for me, when I did my first step 5, they didn't come as soon as I was done.
Me neither.
I felt like really kind of confused and like what just happened. And I walked out of there kind of like going, that was weird. And then, but within a week or two of that, I felt those things. I felt like a freedom. I felt like a relief, but it wasn't something that happened like magically in one moment. It happened just gradually. And I just felt like I was walking a little lighter. But I also, so this is the beginning of a spiritual experience, and this can go actually reverse itself, and you can drink again if you don't move forward with the continuing steps here. So
When a person does a 5, there's a psychological straightening out of sorts. If a person is not talking about their experiences, their thoughts, their emotions, it gets really tangled up. And, you know, like I've worked with people who have just like lived a life of not talking about things, and the mind can really bend and contort. And you hear about like cognitive distortions in psychology, and here we call it like the book kind of, I guess, alludes to that too, like rationalizing and justifying the most messed up crap. And so if you've never talked about things and they keep going over and over in your mind, and each time you're justifying or you're rationalizing or you're blaming or you're minimizing or you're doing whatever you need to do with it to make it like okay in your head. And that is a big part of the delusion that the book talks about. Like we're deluded and we can't tell truth from false. Well, that's because we've got our own scripts going on what's going on. That's a big part of it. And talking to somebody straightens that out, and it starts to break these delusions, these ideas around things that we think that we're doing, and think that the person that I thought that I was, and the way that I thought that I was, and like I was totally deluded. And so through the steps, and like step 4 being a fact finding and fact facing process, and then I'm armed with facts about myself, and I use those facts to start breaking the chains of delusion. And I think that, you know, when you come out of a 5, not only have you talked about it and you've processed it in a way, you've also shared it with another human being who hopefully hasn't judged you, and who has said me too to a certain degree. And that also brings forward the shame into the light, and it loses its power. So there's a lot of things that happen on a psychological and a spiritual level as a result of doing the 5.
And what I'd like to add is, she brought up a good point. When we go through the 5 with somebody, where the validation comes in is I'm sharing my own experiences. I'm sharing a lot of the humiliation and the pain, and like a lot of my actions. Like some people are so afraid to share these things, and they got the courage now to do it. It's still scary, but they're doing it by the grace of God. And then maybe I can see the fear. Maybe I share stories of my own where they only have seen a version of me that kind of puts me a bit on a pedestal. And then I share some of the stories. They're like, holy shit, you did that? Actually, that was in recovery. You did that? And it's like, yeah, man. It's like, I didn't just come here and like the light of God hit me and I'm fucking cured. Like I've been through the ringer of pain and I made a lot of mistakes. And when I was in my active addiction, this is what I did. This is what I did to my wife. This is how I harmed her. This is how I harmed my kids. This is what I did to humiliate myself. And, you know, then it allows them to open up. And every time I share these stories, I heal a little bit more. I'm doing a step 5 in that moment as well by sharing these things, and the power that some of these things have that cause me so much guilt and shame, they lose power millimeter by millimeter every time I share it. It's very similar to sharing your story at a speaker meeting. It does the same thing. And as you heal different aspects of your subconscious where the broken parts of you are, new stuff will come up. And then the new experiences that you might have pushed down so far, they start coming up also. And then you're like, wow, that happened to me when I was a kid. Like I remember I was just talking to a guy I worked with years ago, and I haven't, he's sober now 5 years. He just took 5 years. It's actually Tommy, my buddy who I started the podcast with, but we're reconnected now. And he was sharing with me about a month ago that he remembers things that happened to him as a little kid that he never remembered ever in his life. And that's because as you heal the parts of you, Creator brings things that you need to heal more from.
And that you're ready for.
That you're ready for.
So shall we end relatively on time? Yes, because I want to talk about returning home as a good break, because I would say right there is where my program started to go, because then you're left with your own mind. So that's a whole story for later.